Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Okay, you know I'm from the Pacific Northwest, so this one feels special. My favorite team as a kid growing up was the Washington Huskies. They beat the Longhorns 37-31. I think I felt the entire game. I bet a money line on DraftKings today. I just kept saying Texas has better players. Texas has better players. And then over the last 24 hours, I'm like, what am I doing? Washington's receivers and quarterback are a huge mismatch edge over the secondary for the Longhorns. And I like Sark. I love Kalen DeBoer as a coach. And the time, their execution until the final minute of the game was the cleanest of the four teams that played in the playoff. And they have the fewest 4- and 5-star recruits. So this staff develops and coaches its butt off. By the way, when you put in 4 really good football teams instead of 3 really good teams and one that's deserving, whatever that means, Florida State, this is what it looks like. That was the best day of college football, the best playoff day of college football in its history, because nobody got caught up on deserving. It was just 4 really good teams with big-time quarterbacks and big-time coaches, most important position healthy and ready to roll. Okay, Florida State would have dragged this entire thing down. So bigger argument is Georgia getting in, but let's not waste any time talking about that. They didn't. So 37-31. I think Washington will probably be a 3 to a 4-point underdog against Michigan. I'll take Washington in the points, although I'm not sure they'll win. I think the game, Michigan's got much better defensive backs than Texas and are a handful. Washington just went through a battle with a big, strong Texas team. And here we go. 1 week from now, it's Michigan. So that's going to be an all-time classic. Let's start with Washington. This is how they play. So all their games look like this. It's exhausting. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, been a Husky fan forever. This has been, in the history of college football, the team that wins the national championship looks like it at about week 4 or 5. And they usually have 6 to 7 blowouts. Even in the NFL, over the last decade, all but one team in the last decade, one Super Bowl champ, has had fewer than 6 blowouts. And that's in pro football. The margins are very tight. In college football, your national championship team usually has 7 or 8 blowouts. That's what, like Michigan had this year. That's what Texas had. Washington doesn't blow out anybody. The Apple Cup against Washington State was close. Oregon State in the rain was close. Arizona State was close. Washington plays close football games. They don't have a loaded 4- and 5-star roster. They don't play downhill. What they do is have the ability, if they play poorly, to score quickly and score late because of Michael Penix. And let's talk about Penix. I think he throws the best football since maybe Joe Burrow in college. It's interesting. So Justin Herbert and C.J. Stroud at Oregon and Ohio State, in their last college game, their coaches let them run. Did you notice tonight, Penix doesn't run. He was a running quarterback to some degree at Indiana, had a couple of surgeries, ACL. So they make him a pocket quarterback. But Washington's coaches had a couple of quarterback draws drawn up tonight, and they're going to let him run. They will let him run against Michigan, and it is a weapon. So J.J. McCarthy and Michael Penix will be moving in that game. Their final college game for Penix, who's a more pure thrower of the football than J.J. McCarthy. Again, Washington is the kind of team, they're really built for these kind of playoff games, because even if Washington would have been outplayed tonight, and they weren't, they outplayed Texas, they're just built to come back and score 2 touchdowns in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. That's what. So Washington's never out of a football game because they get very good pass protection. Penix was only sacked 11 times all year. That's insane for a guy that just sits in the pocket. He's not hypermobile anymore. Although he's mobile, he's not hypermobile. J.J. McCarthy's probably more mobile. He was sacked 11 times. And the Pac-12 had the best conference it's had in years. So he faced Oregon's defensive front twice. And Texas couldn't get to him. So between Westover, Rome Odunze, their best receiver, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, that is a stacked tight end wide receiving core. Stacked, all good hands, no drops, great routes. So Michigan does not have nearly the firepower on the perimeter that Washington does. Washington's got the better quarterback, the more accurate quarterback, the better pocket quarterback, significantly better wide receiver talent. Both have good offensive lines. Michigan is better guard, center guard, two great coaches. I think it'll be a classic matchup. Now, Michigan's defense is better, but it'll be tested more. I mean, Washington, if you watch what Washington does, they ask their receivers to block. Washington does not have great running backs, and they may have lost Dillon for the championship game. He's banged up, went off the field smiling, thumbs up, cross your fingers if you're a Husky fan. He's vital because they don't have dominating running backs, but they have a good enough offensive line, and the threat of throwing constantly and the way they move their personnel around, they're pretty effective running the ball in spots, but Michigan's great at it. So I think you're going to have a classic final game. I'll probably take Huskies and the points. I'm not sure if I'd take a money line because Harbaugh's such a great coach. But I think the two best teams won. I went in today saying I was going to take Michigan close, and I was going to take Washington to upset Texas. And I don't think Texas is poorly coached, but I think they have more good athletes. But I don't think they're nearly as good as Washington at the quarterback position. The two best quarterbacks won today. All these coaches are good. The two best quarterbacks won. And Penix is smooth and accurate and just has a calmness about him. Sark's going to get a lot of pushback, but it was Sark's team that came rallying back. And it was Kalen DeBoer, a terrific coach. His team kind of imploded in the last minute. Some coaching stuff that Washington rarely makes those mistakes. I love their staff. So, I mean, we all kind of thought it was going to be a wildly entertaining, high-scoring game, and Washington had a chance to win. And that's what we saw. Washington controlled most of the game. And, it's funny, as a kid who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, if Washington, John Middlecoff has mentioned this, if Washington just was called USC, they'd probably be a favorite. But they're geographically jammed up in the corner of the country. Oregon, because of Phil Knight, their uniforms and the Ducks marketing program gets more love. But Washington has had four great coaches in the history of their program. Don James won a Natty. Rick Neuheisel won a Rose Bowl. Chris Peterson got to the playoff, and Kalen DeBoer's in a Natty. It's a really good program, well-funded, great loyal fans, home field edge. There's just enough talent in the Seattle and Washington State area. They mostly put a fence around it, mostly. And then they've always recruited California well if they have the right coach. So they do a little bit of Texas recruiting, but it's mostly California, Washington State, occasionally Hawaii and Oregon. But they've always struggled to consistently get great NFL level defensive interior linemen that a Texas can get and Alabama can get. It is sort of jammed up in the Pacific Northwest, but it's always been just between Chris Peterson still in the program and Kalen DeBoer, you're talking about high functioning recruiting, development, patience. And Kalen DeBoer and Grubb, the OC, let's be honest, two offensive coaches in the national championship. Even in the NFL and in college football, it is an advantage. And you just saw how clean and efficient Washington was in this game until the final 90 seconds. What's really interesting is, I said this earlier, Michigan had good special teams this year and was a disaster today. Washington is a team that gets penalized occasionally, and they played a pretty clean football game for most of it. So, there's a lot of nerves. These are young 20-year-old men, 21-year-old men. Michigan was super tight early in their game. I thought Texas was a little tight as a favorite in their game early tonight. But I think we got the right teams in the championship. And I think Michigan's going to be favored by 3.5-ish, 4. I would take the Huskies in the points. And I think it's going to be It's not going to be this high scoring, this many yards, but there's going to be some points. Michigan's going to be able to run the football. Washington's going to be able to throw it. It feels 28-27 to me. Either way, Michigan should be favored. They had more blowouts, but the Pac-12 was a better conference. And I mean, Washington's got now 2 wins over Oregon and a win over Texas. Michigan's got a win over Bama and Ohio State. I don't think it's a great Alabama team. It's one of the weaker Nick Saban playoff teams, in my opinion. But man, what a day, what a night. And thank you to the committee for not bending a knee for a team that's deserving on a third quarterback. Let them play somewhere else. Let's get what does deserving mean? Remember, there's only 4 playoff spots. There's 5 conferences plus Notre Dame. The structure of this playoff was always we could have 6 undefeated teams and 4 spots. Aesthetics matter. Optics matter. Always have. The very foundation of college football's playoff is 4 spots, 5 conferences plus Notre Dame. It's how you look, especially at the end of the season. And these teams looked really good. You know what? With Texas losing, what it told you was the SEC team was the weakest team in it. So Michigan and Washington win, and Texas thumped Alabama in Tuscaloosa. So how about that? The SEC not only is not in the championship, they had the weakest, and I do believe that. Their offense is one-dimensional with Jalen Milroe. Bama, SEC had the weakest team in the playoff. Wow. What a day. What a night. And I've said this, I didn't grow up in Texas, but I've always had an affinity for Sark and the Longhorns. Great program. They'll be back. Their NIL, their collective raises a lot of money. Sark's a good coach. The SEC is a different ball game. Nobody's going to go undefeated in the SEC anymore. And nobody's going undefeated in the Big Ten. I don't care how good Michigan is. You got to go out to Seattle, Eugene, LA, Columbus. Nobody's going undefeated in these conferences anymore. And that's okay. You'll be able to lose now if you're a Big Ten or an SEC team. You could lose 2 games and still get into the tournament if they're the right 2 games. You lose on the road close to an Oregon or an LSU. But undefeated, boy, that seems highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. God, I love college football.